John the dog.
Good afternoon. Welcome, Rotarians and guests. Please rise. It's time for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring.
Please remain standing for our invocation, Dan Duke.
Let us pray. God of grace, we give you thanks for this day and a chance to be together. We give you thanks for the many opportunities that you call us to serve others. Bless this meal that we share together. Bless the program as an inspiration for us today. Bless our time together. All this we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Remain standing for 1 minute longer for our song of the day, led by our
You guys can do this one, and ladies, this is easy. Great.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night like a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Amen. Thank you.
Good job, guys and ladies. Please be seated. We do not have any visiting Rotarians today to introduce, so we're going to go on ahead to introduction of guests of Rotarians today. Do we have any guests in the dining room? Anyone on my right? Yes, John.
President Suzanne, I'm pleased to have my wife Harriet with me today. She wants to hear about the puppies.
Okay, it's nice to have you today. Any other guests to my right? Any guests down the center? John, would you like to introduce your guests?
I have a number of guests today, so we'll start with this table to the right, some real special folks. If you guys will stand up as I introduce you. My first guest is Jeff Medley. Jeff is the supervisor of the Hickory Canine Office. Two colleagues from my business, from Sharp Business Systems, Kirk Leonard, who is our service manager for Western North Carolina, and Jerry Shoemate, who is our general sales manager for the state. Several really good friends, Bob Ward, Sue James, and Judy Allred. And then a little bit closer, my sister Becky, and my wife Ann.
Thank you for bringing all those guests and sharing Rotary with these folks. Any guests to my left? Yes, Ray?
Yes, I'm here to introduce our district attorney, three-term district attorney, hope to be our fourth term district attorney. Dean was going to bring him here today, and I was asked to pinch hit. Going back to fill in for Dean. Not here today, everyone knows Dean, Jay's Dean of father-in-law, right? That is correct. And glad Jay's here. I appreciate his friendship.
Maybe Jay Gator.
Welcome, Jay. Anyone else to my left? Okay. Well, by way of announcements today, I haven't had any requests. I usually have 3 or 4 people coming up to me asking for announcements, so I'm going to take a moment to say thank you to everyone. I've had lots of warm welcome and welcoming me back. I'm still a little bit jet lagged. I've been in Australia, for those of you who don't know, for the past 2 weeks attending the Rotary International Convention. I did get to do a couple of fun sightseeing things along the way, but Rotary International Convention has a way of reinvigorating and exciting Rotarians about what we do and making us more aware of the international component, the worldwide component of Rotary. It was really wonderful. Of course, there were quite a lot of Australians were there, and I found out that they do say good day all the time rather than hello or good morning. They also say no worries all the time, which a lot of younger people in America are saying that instead of no problem. But we found a new one was too easy. Everything is too easy, which was really a lot of fun, and the whole atmosphere in Australia was really cool. The convention itself was very impressive and inspiring. We were addressed by the Prime Minister of Australia, who announced the gift from the country of Australia of $100 million towards the Polio Plus efforts, which is exciting to realize that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is going to triple that by making $200 million contribution towards that. We did get an update about what is going on with that, and I got a better understanding of how they declare a country to be polio-free. Then the next day in the news, I saw the Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, sitting next to our president at the D-Day Memorial, so that was kind of cool to have that happen. The other interesting Rotarians I met were amazing, and with, to me, the most exciting one being a gentleman at my table who was from Nepal, and I happened to give him one of our banners, which is now hanging in Kathmandu. I just thought that was really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the podium over to John Hall for the program today.
Thank you, President Suzanne. You are in for a treat today from our special guest, Kat Warren. And not wanting to infringe on her time, I would encourage you to read the front of the spoke for some of her background. Just 3 quick bullets. In the brief time that I have known Kat, I already count her as more than just a really special guest who graciously accepted driving from Raleigh to share a program with us today, but I count her as a friend. Secondly, her book, What the Dog Knows, recently published and already nominated for a very prestigious national award, is wonderful. You should buy it, you should read it, give it to family and friends, particularly dog lovers. And I did ask Kat to bring some of her books today, so if you would like one today, you can get it at the more than the Barnes & Noble discount, and you don't have to go to Barnes & Noble because she's going to sell it to you at her cost, which is $20. And you will get a BOGO in terms of autographs because she will autograph the book, and in absentia, her great cadaver dog Solo will also autograph the book for you. Lastly, lest Steve Mull call me out again like he did a few weeks ago when our son was here to accept a Paul Harris Fellow, she is a wolf packer. Please welcome Kat Warren.
Thank you, John, and I'm going to try to keep on time. Can everybody hear me? I'm going to actually come up front here to talk because I have my I have a few little slides to just keep me on track, and I also have a short video. So this is how it started. I was an academic. I'd just gotten tenure. I was pretty happy about that. I decided to reward myself by getting our 3rd German Shepherd pup. And his job was going to be pretty simple. He was going to lie under my desk and sleep until I wanted to play with him in the yard, and then he would come out and play, and then he'd go back under the desk and sleep. There were a couple of problems with that. He was a singleton. And I don't know those of you who are familiar with this, but when there's a litter of one, unlike with people, you get a generally dog-aggressive, hostile, sociopathic dog. Not 100%, but these are dogs that have issues because they don't get all that nice litter interaction of biting each other and figuring out if it hurts too much, you're going to get bitten back. So the first night he arrived at our house, I cried in my husband's arms. I said, I don't like him. And he said, don't worry, we'll just return him. And of course that made me more upset. He walked into the house and he tried to hump our Irish setter, our female Irish setter, and whom we had adopted from my father. And I thought, this is going to be a problem. And then he started flunking out of puppy classes. And I mean, literally, he would walk into a room, snarling, growling, barking. I changed vets twice because vets would say, oh, this dog's going to be a problem. He's going to bite somebody. And so when he was 4 months old, I went to a trainer, and she looked at him. He was pouncing against the cyclone fence trying to get at her dogs. She has Malinois, and she boards dogs. And I was trying to say, come here, here's a liver treat. And she looked at me and she said, stop giving him so many treats, you're making him into a wuss. And then she said, he's just a jackass. What do you want to do? And I said, I don't know, I just want him to not do what he's doing up against the fence there. And she said, why don't you make him into a cadaver dog? And I had no idea what that was. I thought, dead dog. And at the time, it was really going to be okay with me. And she explained that if, and Jeff knows this better than anybody in the room except for somebody sitting next to him who does Schutzhund, but basically, dogs are really good at being trained on any scent that you want to present to them. And in the case of a cadaver dog, they're looking for somebody who is missing and presumed dead, or sometimes parts of people. I promise that for those of you who have weak stomachs, I won't get into too much of the nitty-gritty here. Let's just call it a smell that the dog sees is incredibly pleasant because he associates it with a toy reward, right? And Nancy at the time said, yes, of course you can do this. Later she told me that she had no idea that little hippie yuppie that I was, that I would actually move forward and train him as a cadaver dog. But what happened was that when he was about 2 months old, the Durham Police Department canine sergeant invited me to train with them because for the most part, canine units for both the county and for cities really don't need a dedicated cadaver dog. It's a specialty. So in some big departments like Chicago or New York, you can have those dogs, but there's just not enough call for them. And so it falls to volunteers. And for Durham, occasionally people are dead and missing in Durham. That's, for me, one of the upsides of living in Durham now. Because of course, I train the dog, right? And the fact is that when you train, you actually want to get called out. This is one of those things where it's a very odd hobby. As you can imagine, any number of my colleagues don't want to talk about it in the English department where I teach. And there was one time when I actually didn't talk about it and I told the head that I actually had a call out. And he said, well, what are you doing? And I explained, and he got this look on his face of utter dismay. Since he's actually come around. Writing the book helped, because that was a kind of English department thing to do. Well, what happened along the way to doing this, and this was now 8.5 years ago that I started working and training with the Durham PD occasionally and also with the Durham Sheriff, is that when Solo was about 6 and he had been out on a number of cases, and we would basically go out as volunteers, and only through word of mouth. Somebody would know through Durham or through the medical examiner's office that I had a dog that they thought could do the work, and a department will call me and I'll go. It's a very sweet deal for me because I can't dedicate my whole life to this. It's already, training dogs like this, as anybody who trains them knows, is really time-committing procedure. And so it felt just about right to me to be called out 5 or 6 times a year, okay? And of course, along the way, in training, you get to know all of these other breeds. Malinois, Dutch Shepherds, German Shepherds, Labradors, Clawhounds, Bloodhounds. What's fascinating about the Bloodhound, this is actually a really nice Bloodhound from Greensboro, I think, is that you can get good ones, but Bloodhounds have been to some degree ruined from overbreeding, right? So some of that sort of mythology around Bloodhounds having the best nose, etc., is just that. It's mythology. What people have realized, and especially the Army when it started to do research, is that most dogs with noses could find stuff, okay? With a couple of exceptions. Pugs aren't really good, as you can imagine, working in the North Carolina heat. But I've known a couple of, for instance, really great border terrier trailers, right? I've seen some nice pits working, doing this kind of work. And so the Bloodhound has a wonderful nose, but some of this stuff that we hear about it being 10,000 times better or 1,000,000 times better than the human nose, we just don't know, okay? And how many of you have heard the long ears and the folds help pull scent up from the ground? Also not true. What's fun is to actually watch a German Shepherd or a Malinois do a track and realize that although most canine units don't concentrate on cold, long tracks, when they do that, occasionally during training, that those dogs do beautifully. One of the things that I also did in doing this book, because I'm an academic, there's always this fascination of going down rabbit holes. One of the rabbit holes, which was wonderful, was going back to the early military research that happened just post-Vietnam. And this was after they realized that the Vietnam sentry dogs and patrol dogs were pretty effective. And there was some money hanging around post-Vietnam, and some military researchers who were bored and started thinking about some of the ways that they might really study what dogs could be used for. And we were also getting things happening like assassinations and people like B.B. Cooper diving out of airplanes after hijacking them. So the military, and having a little extra money, decided to not only look at a bunch of dogs, but they also experimented with things like pigs, timber wolves, coyotes, javelinas. The pigs were great, as you maybe know from truffle hunting in Europe. The pigs were actually stunning. The problem was that they were using them for searching for mines, and pigs tend to root, and they realized that this was not going to be good for the pig long term. And then it's simply the social stigma. It's the same reason that canine units don't have poodles as drug dogs. Poodles would make great drug dogs, but there is, there's a little bit of lack of machismo there. What the military did, of course, was say, what we're going to do in airports is we're going to get good-looking women, and we're going to put a lapdog with them or a poodle with them, and they're going to walk around the airport without being detected. and when they smell gunpowder, they're going to alert, right? So there was a lot of absolutely wonderful research. Some of the other research that people did, of course, that I have to note is that people have really good noses too, okay? And we underestimate them. And one of the things that scientists do inevitably is they like to play with undergraduate students. And so one of the really good little experiments was actually blindfolding and putting knee pads and gloves on students and having them follow a chocolate trail. The reason I show this is because of the fact that these days scientists are underestimating the capacity of dogs and the cognitive capacity of dogs, and are saying, oh, if you point, the dog follows your finger to the treat, while a wolf will go straight for the treat under the other cup, right? Without any understanding that if you actually get dogs or people out in the field and train them, that their capacity is going to build. What was sweet about this little chocolate trail is that, of course, once the students were trained, they got faster and faster. And so I put this up just because scientists are tending to forget that dogs are like people. You need to build their expertise, right? And that the wonderful thing about learning about working dogs is sort of realizing as you start to layer in those things on a dog, you can get a dog that can do some pretty complex problem solving. And I think that any patrol canine officer who's worked for the dog for years is going to say, you know, at the point that they're just perfect, you've got about another year and then you have to retire them because their bodies are breaking down, right? At that level at which a 5-year-old dog is both at the top of its game, starting to solve problems, and has got the physical capacity. So one of the things that I do in the book is I go back and forth between talking about cadaver dog work, but other kinds of work. And this is Strega. She's a German Shepherd. She was 9 years old, really at the end of her working life, in Iraq, working in 110-degree heat rather than being in West Virginia, where she came from. She learned very quickly to adjust to the different conditions in Iraq and Afghanistan. She was also a water cadaver dog, and so one of the things I write about in the book is not only her experience in Iraq, but she was flown into Afghanistan to help with the recovery in a tragedy of a couple of troopers who had fallen into a river and couldn't be recovered, and the Taliban was claiming that they had the bodies. And of course this was no end of tragedy, and the military was not going to leave until they had an outcome. And a number of people had already died when they brought in Strega, who helped pinpoint where the body was. Okay? And it's one of those things where you think about cadaver dogs, mostly you're giving resolution to people or helping DAs move forward with prosecutions. Sometimes, and in the case of Strega, she really helped save lives. So one of the lovely things, and I think that with my new pup, I'm going to get her on a boat this summer. I've got a 21-month-old German Shepherd. Water cadaver is this beautiful thing that I think nothing can replace. A good dog that can work on water. And especially in North Carolina, our conditions are that very often our water is not beautifully clear. And it can be very, very hard and dangerous to pinpoint if you have a drowning victim. Dogs can really narrow that area in, and all they're doing is the same thing they're doing with any kind of volatile, is that scent comes up to the surface, the dog tells the boat where to go. As the boat goes back and forth, the dog can't do it itself. It's like being hobbled by the boat, but the dog will go from one side of the boat to the other and then pinpoint where it thinks the body is. And I reported on cases up to 260 feet deep. So we're talking 12 stories, right? And pretty cold water. And this is the kind of thing where if you did not have that, right, you could take a submersible robot and try to cover a lake. But this is a marvelous tool. A lot of the people I featured in my book, this is just a quickie, were at the Ozo mudslide in late March in Washington, where because of overlogging and torrential rain, the side of a mountain sheared off and came down. It was closer to a tsunami than a mudslide. As one handler said, it was like a giant blender mixed trees and houses and mud together. The mud was 70 feet deep in spots. They really never anticipated that the dogs would be so incredibly helpful. And they have recovered everybody except for one victim in that. And to some degree, one of the things is to say is that the dog is one tool, okay? It's never the only answer. It's just one thing that you use. What was, I think, moving to people in the mudslide was that you look at a square mile of mud and you go, where do you start, right? And it was the dogs that allowed the searchers to say, well, let's go here and here and here. And there's a psychological comfort to that as well. The searchers weren't in a position to just start taking that away. The dogs said, we can pinpoint. And it was, I think it was amazing, especially given the fact that this was a kind of mud that was sort of like little pieces of slate all piled on top of each other. Very hard for scent to get up. That's the new pup. She is, how do I say this nicely, busting my rear. Solo was incredibly easy to train compared to her, simply because despite the fact that he was a singleton, he really wanted to please. He had lots of natural drive, and he wasn't interested in going out and killing things like she is. She has what we call high prey drive, which is a great thing if you can rechannel it properly, right? To say, you know what, let's not chase rabbits and deer. Let's hunt for the thing I want you to hunt for. So she and I are in the midst of a negotiation about this. And I'm learning probably more than I even learned with Solo, and I'm not sure that I'm as successful. And somebody said to me, it was a sort of a doggy woo person, Kat, why don't you just let it emerge so that she becomes what she's meant to be? And of course I said, no, she's going to be a cadaver dog. So this is a stay tuned. And I want to show you before I end here a quick video just to show the principle, which actually I'm sure many of you already know. Let me get this on full view. So I want to say a couple things since I have a couple minutes about this. Being filmed is always a problem because for experienced dogs, they're really good at reading you, okay? And when you're filmed, you have to know where the hides are, all right? And one of the things that good trainers and handlers work constantly against is what's called the Clever Hans effect. And has any of you heard of Clever Hans in here? So Clever Hans was a draft horse in Germany at 19th century, turn of the 20th century. Gorgeous big horse. He had a math teacher owner, and Hans could do math. So his owner would give him a math problem, and Hans would tap his foot and give the answer. And he started to draw huge crowds, right? Because his owner would say, you know, if there are 15 Sundays in this particular 6 months and it falls on a Tuesday, how many? And the horse would tap and the crowd would gasp, And the owner himself began to think that the horse was actually bilingual and capable of doing these problems because the horse was so darn good. And a psychologist went at the problem in Germany rather stubbornly, and of course what was discovered was that the horse was picking up subconscious cues not only from his owner but from the audience. So the more success he had, the better he got at math, right? So this becomes a problem if you're during training not having other people hide stuff for you where you don't know where it is, okay? So I say that this is a sort of fake video, but we're looking for two things here. One of them, as you'll see, are teeth. And teeth emit very little scent. Human decomposition is pretty complicated, and if you think about a dog that's going about finding everything from very old dry bone up to somebody who is rather freshly disappeared, okay? Actually, a fellow I trained with just 3 days ago, his dog was able to recover most of somebody who had disappeared 3 years ago, an Alzheimer's patient, in a state just south of us. And it was really important because a fellow went in there with his daughter hunting snakes. They found the top of a skull. That's not sufficient for identification. Law enforcement came in. It was a swampy area, no go. They brought the dog in, and the dog was able to find a lot of the scattered bone, okay? As you can imagine, teeth can be really helpful in identifying. So here's Solo working. He's about 8 years old. And all he's doing is working off lead, and you'll see him come down here. I had planted something down by the river, I think a little bit of carpet from underneath somebody who committed suicide. And you can see him start to slow down there, okay? And lift his head a little bit. You learn to, the body language of each dog is different, right? My other shepherd doesn't work nearly as obviously. And here's a couple teeth. I have a really wonderful dentist who doesn't bleach them, but occasionally says, I got a couple for you. And he keeps them under his sink. And what you'll see here is watch him come in and watch him just hitch there. He's hit the scent cone. He's going to narrow it down. It's on the other side of that little tree. And he puts his nose on them and does it down. Okay? And then gets rewarded. Now, most drug dogs are taught to actually stare directly at the source of the drug. Solo from the get-go got very close to it, would touch it and turn and look at me. It's fine. And see, he also taught himself that if I was too far away, he's like, hurry up. He would come get me. And especially across a field or in the woods, if he felt that I hadn't seen what he'd done, he would do essentially a refine. So, and then we're walking out of the woods slow motion. So that's it. And John, are there a couple minutes for questions? Where are we for time?
Yes. Questions?
Are there questions?
Right here.
Yes.
Just, I'm going to thank you for being an English teacher at NC
NC
State.
speak
Class
up.
82 English major.
Class of 82 English major at NC State.
The other thing is that you mentioned early on that when you took the dog to the trainer said it sounded like almost immediately if you thought about training the dog to be a cadaver dog. I'm curious about that. And the other thing is, did they try to train the undergraduates to beer instead of chocolate?
Oh my God, think of the success they would have had if they started with beer. They would have been so fast. It was immediate because of this. I had had dogs that I trained in obedience. He was not going to be an obedience dog. He actually, between his aggression issues and his drive, his aggression now is completely under control. I mean, that's the nice thing about learning how to work with dogs, is that you know, I grew to learn that he wasn't that far outside the mainstream, and certainly not for a patrol dog, for instance. But for me, I couldn't leave the classroom to do live search, right? And I hate to say this, but the dead can wait, okay? There are a few cases where you've got to drop everything and get right to the scene, and I've done that on cases, but for the most part, and especially in North Carolina, if you have somebody who's been missing for a few months and you get a call at night, you say, can we hit it first thing in the morning when it's cool, and just as it starts to warm up, because you get that nice thing where as soon as it starts to warm, scent rises and you have a better chance. So for me, it was the purely practical matter of not leaving the classroom. And this particular trainer had experience both with tracking trailing dogs and cadaver dogs. So I'll suggest to the Berkeley professors they should try beer next time. Yes?
I wondered if cadaver dogs were used in the aftermath of 9/11 at the World Trade Center, and if in that environment that would work.
Some cadaver dogs were used. A lot of mythology got built up after the 9/11 because there were all these reports that dogs were getting depressed because they were finding dead people, and that was not the case. They were using live find dogs who are used to finding live people. The handlers were reacting. The fact is that they just didn't have enough cadaver dogs. So yes, they did use some cadaver dogs, and it does work. Those are really, of course, incredibly difficult search conditions. But another analogy to that is, you would have no memory of this, but back in the 80s, L'Ambiance Plaza was a place in Bridgeport, Connecticut that was used what's called lift slab construction. I don't know if you were familiar with it, where you pour a floor, pour all 6 floors, and then jack them up one at a time. It was a quick, cheap way to build high-rises. And it's also quick and cheap to keep your workers underneath the building continuing to work if you're off schedule and your costs are going. And what happened essentially is one of the jacks failed, the building twisted, 6 floors of concrete came down on 26 workers. The ones who were lucky were the ones who were close to the side, who were blown out by the force of it. So one of the people I write about, Andy Reppin, who was with Connecticut State Police, put together a team of 5 dogs, 5 men. They came in, that was in the late 80s. They were able to pinpoint every single victim. And that was, I was on that pile myself because I was a reporter for the Hartford Courant at the time. And I was sent down there overnight. And, you know, it was a pile about the size, twice the size of this room, with pretty impossible conditions. And it, you know, it's a great example. I do think that dogs that are trained for disaster, it's fantastic work. It's also inherently much more dangerous than the kind of work that I do, right? Because I'm usually called out on a homicide or an Alzheimer's case, and I'm searching the countryside, right? And it can be a little hinky out there, let's face it, just between garbage and snakes, etc. But nothing compared to the people who really train dogs to work in those conditions.
One more, anybody? Kat will be here afterwards for other questions if you want to talk to her individually. And she will have her book. Thank you.
Thank you.